everybody, and welcome to my backyard. I am set up here. I've got all of my knives. We're going to do a lesson on chef knives! Yay! Aside from the French knives, there are some French knives. That look really good. Some French knives. I know a lot of you are excited about it. And those of you who aren't, you're not excited because you don't know how much fun knives can be. Every chef in the world is obsessed with knives. They're our most used tool, the most helpful tool, the thing that we work with more often than anything else. So we have one in our hand practically every minute of every day. And there are some certain things that you have to know about knives in order to pass the Pro Start exam. And there are some certain things that you need to know about knives to use them well and safely. Plus, there's just some things that are fun to know. Just fun. Like, for example, knives began as swords. So let's start there. Where did the kitchen knife come from? There are two places where swords were made in the 17th and 18th century. Two places, Germany and Japan. Now, Germany and Japan held on to the technology, and they have, as swords stopped being used, and we started to use it in rifles and missiles and evidently the coronavirus. What happened was there were all these guys, and they didn't really have a job. And they took their knowledge of making swords, and they started using it and applying it towards kitchen cutlery. Now, these guys were master swordsmiths. So chef's knives have a very, I would say, almost a noble tradition. And they began in these two different places using two wildly different methods of crafting and shaping. Both the metal, the handle, the shape, the feel, the weight. All of those traditions have carried forward. Now, it's important for us to think about the knife as, first, it was a weapon. It was a weapon before it was a cooking implement. The most classic example that I can think of is the butter knife. Ever wonder why a butter knife has a round tip? It's because of King Louis XIV. Somebody came up to him and said, there's a lot of people that are dying because of knives. And he said, I have decreed that all butter knives shall have a round tip to prevent murder. So when we're talking about these two places where knives, chef's knives, started being produced in Germany and in Japan, at that point it becomes important for us just to go ahead and accept that the French had a huge influence on how knives were going to be made, because they were that's where the culinary center of the world for a very long time was France. And what they wanted was this. This is a French chef's knife. It is one of my favorite. It's a French chef's knife that was made in Germany. This is where it gets a little confusing, because there is a German chef's knife. Yeah, okay. Let me clear away the knives, and let's get down to brass tacks. In the beginning, there were only two knives, two types of knives. A third would come along a little later, but in the beginning of the chef's knife, there was the French chef's knife, which has a flat belly, and the German chef's knife, which has a more rounded belly. When we're talking about the belly, we're talking about the curvature of the blade. Now, that's primarily because the French liked, when they were chopping, they would chop in a bicycle motion. Chop in a bicycle motion. Germans, on the other hand, really liked holding on to the tip and letting the blade rock. I don't know if you can see that at all. Yeah. Well, if you can't, too bad. It's rocking like that. I still like to use the rocking motion. You hold the tip down with 2 or 3 fingers. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort. Look, I just made the entire world bounce around. Oh, I did it again. The rocking motion and the bicycle motion. Those two classic ways to finely chop small things like parsley, green onions, garlic, whatever. And the two types of knives work at that differently. French knife is going to, almost always it's preferred that it's made out of carbon steel. It's very, very hard. Once you get it sharp, it holds the edge forever. However, the carbon steel is a little bit brittle. The stainless knife is much more durable than the carbon steel knife is. It resists rust where the carbon doesn't. It doesn't hold the edge quite as well, but it's very, very durable. So when we're talking about a forged knife, that's actually a really good way of talking about the parts of a knife. Now, the parts of this particular knife, let's start at the tip. Okay, that's obviously the tip. It's the tip. That's what you need to remember about the tip. It's the tip. Jesus. The cutting edge, obviously, is the cutting edge. All the way down this way. Ta-dun, ta-dun. So it's beveled. Both sides are sharpened. This is sharpened at 20 degrees on both sides for 40 degrees total on that edge. So here we got the tip. We got the cutting edge, obviously. The spine is what runs all the way down. It goes all the way down. This particular spine goes from the tip all the way down to the heel, which gives it some more weight. German knives, as opposed to Japanese knives, they like to have more weight in the back of the knife. So back here, because of that big chunk of metal and the rivets, the 3 rivets there, that contributes a lot of weight to the back of the knife. It just makes it feel more sturdy. Another thing that's a little different is the bolster. The bolster right here, that's that little ridge of metal. It protects your fingers, supposedly. People who like to hold the grip in the pinch grip, which is what I always try to teach my students, find that sticking their fingers over the bolster helps. It's such a matter of personal choice. Now, if you took a stamped blade, a blade that wasn't forged, it doesn't have a bolster because it's cut from one flat sheet of metal, like a cookie cutter. They just go around, bam, 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 bam. Hundreds of knives. That's why this knife is so inexpensive. If you compare these two knives and you go, which costs more? Well, this one was like $18. It's a chef's knife. It's a commercial. It can go in the dishwasher. The forged knife, this is a Henkel, and it's probably $200 or $300. I've had it for 30 years, so you buy it once, you don't have to buy another if you take good care of it. I absolutely love my Henkel. I have used him, been a big part of my world. I got him when I was in culinary school. It was part of a kit they sold you when you first started. This was my first professional knife that I bought because I had misplaced my Henkel. Those of you who know me, shut up. I misplaced the Henkel, so I went into a restaurant supply store, bought this for I think it was $12 at the time. Now you can get them for like $24. It's cheap, so cheap. This is so inexpensive, but I've had it for 20 years now. It's a great blade. It's a great blade. I love the fact that it has a nice wide face. Now, when we're talking about the parts of the knife, it's important to think about the tang. The tang is the metal that goes from right here, from the bolster, and then goes through the handle. The bolster, right here, that contributes a lot of weight. But the majority of the weight in a German knife is in the tang. Contrast that with that cheapo knife I got. No tang. It's probably super thin, probably ends right about here. Most of this is just that formed plastic handle. It's formed plastic handle. So we got that. And we got that. And we talked about the tang. Scales. On either side of the handle, there is a shaped, this is called a scale, the two parts of the handle that are stuck to either side. Now, this, let's compare that real quick with a good Japanese knife. This is my baby. Giant bolster. This is a Japanese knife that's made in the German style. Okay, sorry, I know it gets confusing here. If you look here, you'll see that the scales aren't split. There's not two of them. It's one, and it's fitted around the tang. And the tang doesn't go all the way to the end. It stops right here. That's because Japanese knives, they want more of the weight towards the blade end, not as much towards the back end. If you can't do this, see? It's, all the weight is here. A German knife, on the other hand, most of the weight. I can do it. I can do it. Take a German knife, and there's more of the weight in the handle. Okay? Japanese knife, whoa. You can't even do it. You can't even, like, start to. All the weight's in the blade. All the weight's in the blade. The scales on this guy, it's one scale that goes around the tang. Rivets are what hold the handle together, that hold the two scales, or in this case, one scale, to the tang. And then the butt of the knife is the butt of the knife. The butt. The butt of the knife. This is a German style. Japanese knives, they don't have that at all. In a Japanese knife, this is another good example of a Japanese knife. This one is interesting. It's a kiritsuku, and it is considered a Japanese chef's knife. Only the chef is allowed to use this, the executive chef in a Japanese kitchen. Now you can see right now on the light that you see the little lines here. This is called Damascus steel. And what makes it Damascus steel is that it's folded. So as opposed to being one big piece of metal that's forged, gotten very hot, beaten to shape, gotten cold, then again and again and again, forged, or stamped with one sheet of metal where it's cut out like a cookie cutter, this has actually been folded over and over and over again, which makes it flexible. You can actually see it has a little bit of give there. See? Hold on. Let's talk about how to pick a chef's knife. The thought most students have, most young cooks have, to be honest, is bigger is better. The biggest knife, the 18-inch, giant belly, big wide fat blade for scooping up stuff after you're done mincing it, that's your best choice. And I can understand that. This is a workhorse. This is a workhorse. It is going to, you'll use it all the time. However, there's a lot of things that it won't do. It's not going to be very good at cutting through heavy pieces of meat. It's not going to be very good at cutting through heavy pieces of much of anything. It just doesn't have the weight to do so, and because it doesn't hold an edge as well as some of the other types, you're going to constantly be going back to resharpen and resharpen and resharpen it. Okay, so biggest isn't necessarily the best. Well, the smallest is certainly the worst. That would be the next thought, right? This is a lovely little 7-inch utility chef's knife that I have. I cannot even tell you. This was, again, one of my first knives that I ever got. It's another Henkel, and it is, what's the word for awesome? Awesome! It's awesome. It's great for small work, very precise work. So you say to yourself, okay, small isn't terrible, and big isn't best. Maybe I should just get a medium-sized German knife, and I would recommend that for most American culinary students. Rather than go and get yourself a Japanese knife, get yourself a really good German knife. Why? Because the weight is going to work for you well. You don't have to have as much just sheer ability to use a German knife as you do to use a classic French knife or a Japanese knife. Because the weight of the blade is going to do most of the work for you. It holds its edge so well, you can abuse it and it's still going to stay sharp. Whereas Japanese knife, you abuse it, you're going to lose that edge. You're going to abuse it fast. If you don't hone it every single time you use a Japanese knife, you're going to lose the edge. We'll talk about honing in a minute. That leaves, well, why not a good Japanese knife? But the weight being towards the blade means that it is for shorter, more precise cuts, almost always. Another challenge, a big challenge that young culinarians have with Japanese knives is the edge itself. Okay, so a German knife is, you will recall, the edge is 20 degrees on both sides, so it's a 40-degree edge. Japanese knife, on the other hand, is somewhere in the range of 15 to 18 degrees, and you would not think that much of a difference would matter, but it really does. As the angle, let's say this is a 20-degree angle. It looks about 20 degrees. If this is a 20-degree angle, it's fairly easy to keep that sharpened. It's fairly easy. But when you get closer to the 15-degree angle on either side, it's very hard to get that edge, to maintain that edge, and not to flatten it or injure it in the sharpening process or the honing process. This is a honing steel. There's a couple different kinds. This is a classic honing steel. It's not a diamond impregnated one. It is. I've had it forever. If you look at, you can see the little scar marks. I've just beat the crap out of this thing. So the classic way is to pull it towards you like this. That's the classic way. Some people prefer that you do it away. I have a problem with that because there's people over there. There are quite a number of culinary schools that teach their students to attach their honing steel to the cutting board and then to go straight down. Okay. Yeah. Whatever. The way that I teach my students to hone is backwards, going backwards like this. It's low and slow. It's from the heel to the tip, from the bolster right up to the tip. And all you're really doing when you're honing a steel is you are realigning the tiny little steel molecules that are getting funky at the edge while you're cutting. It really is not sharpening. Honing is not sharpening. It's not sharpening because you're not removing any metal. In order to sharpen something, you have to remove metal from it. If you've got an edge and it's wavy, of course you can't see the waviness by looking at it. You'd have to put it underneath a microscope, but it's wavy. The only way to realign those wavy metal molecules is to hone it. Now, if you're doing it with this, because the edge is so much more sharp, you have to pull the knife at a much sharper angle to the honing steel. And because most of us aren't going to stop and stare at the honing steel and make sure that we're at the right angle, all right, well, this is 45 degrees. That's going to be about 25 degrees. And I want 20 degrees. So that's about right there. That's where I want to be. And now the 15 degrees is going to be about 5 degrees. I mean, I know you. I know you. You're not going to do that. That's all I got to say about that. Now comes the fun part. Let's talk about all the other knives there are. And there's a lot. And I love all of them. What your textbook wants you to know. What your textbook wants you to know about the other styles of knives. Okay, we got French knives. You got stamped. You got forged. You got the folded, the lacquered, the Damascus steel, Japanese knife. You know about the different parts of the knife. Good. Let's go over aside from the French knives, there are French knives. I look really good doing that. The French knives. There are a lot of other knives that you use. They're specialty knives for the most part. And I think it's important to kind of have a good working knowledge of what we have. Let's go biggest to smallest, all right? Let's start with the cleaver. The cleaver, which is extremely heavy. It's not a super sharp blade, although you can sharpen it to get it razor sharp. It's just a lot of work because it's so heavy. This is almost a blunt instrument, and it's for hacking. It's for chopping through a whole chicken, cutting through some bone, tearing into a carcass. Cleaver. big. The little hook right there on the edge is because a long time ago, back before butchers worked in such a clean environment, they would hang this from a hook on their belt. So they always had their knife with them. Cleaver, wonderful. That's for like chopping some big stuff, heavy stuff. On the other hand of the world, another meat tool, but the far opposite of as far from a cleaver as you can get. This isn't for chopping. This is for slicing. Doesn't go through bone. It doesn't even go around bone. It's too long. It's used for something called the draw cut, which is when you pull back straight through. You make one long, thin slice. This is what you do when you want to cut yourself some, I don't know, prime rib. Big, long, thin strip of prime rib. A slicer is perfect. Turkey dinners, get yourself a good slicer. Always has a real long blade because you want to keep cutting as you pull. Long, narrow cuts. Not deep cuts. Long, narrow cuts. One last meat knife before we move on to the other types of knives we got. I don't have my fillet knife here. I just have my boning knife. A fillet knife and a boning knife are slightly different. The fillet knife is much thinner and more flexible because it's designed to work with fish. The boning knife is also narrow and quite flexible. Boing, 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 boing. Boing, 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 boing. This is a forged knife, so that lets you know just how flexible it is. This isn't a Japanese knife, and it's designed to go around bones and around joints. I'm going to be using one of these to debone a pork butt in just a minute. Then that brings us to our serrated knives. Now, for those of you who are wondering, serrated refers to these tiny little teeth. Let's see if I can get close enough where you can see those. Ooh, there we go. Little teethies. Each one of those little teeth, the reason it's called serrated is because that's the Latin word for saw. And when they first started coming up with serrated blades for use in the kitchen, they just thought of it as a tiny saw. It's great for delicate foods. This is a tomato knife. These ridges help to go through the tomato without tearing the skin. This is a classic bread knife. You'll notice the angled edge and it's straight here. It's also quite sharp. So don't do what I just did. That's ridiculously stupid. One of the interesting knives that has come along recently that I find just really very helpful. It's a type of a utility knife. And look at that baby. It's serrated. It's small. It's got a rounded edge, so it's not going to pierce skin while you're making thin slices. This is wonderful for things like very soft fruit, like kiwi, mango, anything that you need to do super thin slices of, but tends to have a skin that will tear. This is wonderful. Great little knife. It's not on your list of knives you need to know, but you should buy one. If you see one of these guys, pick her up. Bum ba dum bum, bum ba dum bum bum. Last 3 knives, here we go today. All right, all of these are paring knives. A paring knife is anything that's shorter than 2 or 3 inches, and it's the only knife where you very typically will hold the thing that you're cutting in your hand. Now, I know one of you guys is going to say to me, "But Chad, I saw on YouTube a woman who chopped a whole watermelon like this." And I will go to you, shut up. Shut up, get out of my kitchen. We don't cut into our hand. Ever. Except for when we're using a paring knife. A paring knife is designed to be cut into your hand. It's designed that way. This is the most classic version of the paring knife that I know. It's usually called a French paring knife because it has that same very shallow belly. The Japanese have a similar version. It's an angled paring knife, flat top, straight edge. This is extraordinarily useful. And then the bird's beak. The bird's beak paring knife is for fine cutting of fruits and vegetables. Last but not least, I have been told that I need to explain to you some of the rules. So here are the rules, please follow along. Keep your knives sharpened. A sharp blade cuts more evenly and with less force than a dull blade. And besides, the most dangerous thing in a kitchen is a dull knife. You put more force into cutting it, so if it slips, it's going deep into your hand. If it's very sharp and you're not having to use much force, and you go into your hand, you'll go there, but it'll be a slice, it won't be a stab. Sharp knives, safe knives. Dull knives, dangerous knives. So keep your knives sharp, please. I really appreciate it. Keep your knives freaking sharp. Use a knife only for its intended purpose. I have no idea what this rule is supposed to mean. If I see somebody using a knife to like pry open a can or separate out a lid from... a knife is used for cutting food, and that's all. If you use it for anything else, you shall be killed and fed to the sharks. That's it. Keep the handle of the knife clean and dry. This is especially important when you're doing a lot of cutting. Quick story. About a year ago, we served 450 people a turkey dinner at the city of Apopka, which meant that we had to carve 30 different turkeys. At one point, there was turkey guts freaking everywhere. Everywhere. There was turkey everywhere. It was so nasty. What was fun was that all of our knives got real slimy with turkey fat, and people started slipping around, and I had to stop everyone in the kitchen and say, okay, stop, go and wash your knives, dry the handle. A greasy, slimy handle is a good way to lose a finger. And no joke, don't do that. Keep your knife clean, keep your knife sharp. Never leave knives soaking in water. Big rule in our kitchen is that knives are never left in the sink. Ever. Knives are never left in the sink. An easy way to get yourself kicked out of the program is to leave a knife in the sink and then somebody else get a bad cut by reaching into the sink and grabbing the knife. Don't do it. With our knives, we have a simple process. We wash them, we rinse them, we sanitize them for 30 seconds to a full minute. We don't air dry them, even though that would be better. We don't air dry them. We pat them dry with a paper towel, and we put them immediately back in the knife rack. Always, end of story, that's what we do. Never talk or point with a knife. Okay, if you're talking and pointing with knives, you're an idiot. Don't do this. This is bad. This is bad, okay? This is bad. Don't talk and point with a knife. Poke somebody's eye out. Or stab them. Hey, here's a better point about talking. Hey, don't interrupt somebody while they're trying to cut. Don't interrupt somebody while they're trying to cut. Do not interrupt somebody. Do not bump into them. Don't touch them. Don't bother them while they're trying to work with a knife. Do not do it. Don't. Let them focus. For gosh sakes. If a knife is dropped, you drop a knife by mistake, let it go. You are not Spider-Man. You are not going to be able to catch that knife. There is an instinctive thing in our brain. It's falling. I'll try to catch it. Don't. Let it go. Even if the knife breaks in half, that knife is a lot cheaper than your hospital visit. Do not try to catch a falling knife. Got it? Got it? Good. Store knives and, well, where they go? We store them in the knife rack. Never hand someone a knife. There is a safe way to hand someone a knife. But I have found with my students, at first I tried to teach them how to do it, which is where you tuck your fingers back, you hold the knife like this, and you hand it blade down, like that. If I hand the knife like this to you, you're going to grab it right here, and you're going to pull it down, and I'm safe. And you're safe, and no one's getting cut. I have since discovered with my students, it's just easier to say, put it flat, turn it around with the handle facing who you want to hand it to, and let the other guy pick it up. It's just smarter. So, I cannot do this right. Where did I put them? There they are. Found them. I say this. Get yourself a good, short, German-style utility knife. This is 6-7 inches. You're going to go out and buy a knife, this is a great one to start with. Do not go to Home Goods and buy something that looks like a chef's knife. Do not do that. That is a waste of your money. A, if they had a good knife there, and you wouldn't know what it was. It'll be some weird brand that nobody's ever heard of. But it might be a good brand, like Mac. You see Mac, M-A-C, you see Mac at Home Goods, you see Mac at Marshall's or TJ Maxx or Tuesday Morning or one of those discount stores, you buy it. It doesn't matter how much it costs. You buy it. Macs are amazing. Do I have my Mac out here? No, it's at school. So I don't have the Mac here. Yeah, that's the kind of knife that you'll want to pick up. A knife that you'll have forever. Don't buy a knife that you're gonna throw away. Why do that? Why waste the $40? Spend a little bit more. Spend $75 or $80. Be a knife you'll have forever. Get yourself a good German-style utility knife. Get yourself a good French-style chef's knife. Either forged, like this one is, or one that has been put together through the Damascus steel process, also known as lacquering. The layered steel of a Japanese knife, a good Japanese knife that's made in the French style.